She left home telling her parents she'd be spending the night with friends. They assume she left in her white P-Reg Rover 214i. She hasn't been seen since.
Nothing to suggest why she would disappear. She just didn't come home one night.
Imagine this. A 19-year-old woman vanishes without a trace. No body, no crime scene, no weapon. Just 4 text messages claiming she'd run away to Scotland. But those text messages, they weren't written by her at all. This is the story of Jenny Nicholl, a case that would revolutionize how we prosecute murder in the digital age and introduce a new kind of evidence to the courtroom: your unique linguistic fingerprint. It's 2005 in North Yorkshire, England. Jenny Nicholl is 19 years old, living what appears to be an ordinary life. She has her routines, regular tanning appointments, a consistent work schedule, plans with friends. She's a teenager with a future. And then one day she's gone. At first, investigators treat it as a potential voluntary disappearance. Why? Because Jenny's phone sends out 4 text messages after she vanishes. The messages paint a picture of a young woman fleeing an allegedly abusive home, heading to Scotland to start fresh. It seems plausible. Teenagers run away. It happens. But here's where things get interesting and dark. Jenny had a secret, a relationship she'd kept hidden from almost everyone in her life. And that secret was with a man named David Hodgson, a married man who had known Jenny since she was just 14 years old. Their relationship began when she was still a child and continued until her disappearance at 19. Think about those numbers for a moment. The age gap, the power imbalance, the secrecy that isolated Jenny from her support network. This wasn't just a relationship, this was a textbook case of predatory grooming. Hodgson had positioned himself in Jenny's life, developed a relationship with her, and then systematically isolated her through that very secrecy. Her family and friends remained largely unaware. She was, in effect, quarantined from the people who could protect her. Police begin digging into Jenny's life, and the voluntary disappearance theory starts crumbling. Her bank accounts, untouched. Her tanning appointments, missed, something completely out of character. Her work schedule, abandoned without notice. And here's where the digital forensics become crucial. Phone records reveal a flurry of calls and texts between Jenny and Hodgson throughout the day of her disappearance. Then something chilling: silent calls from Hodgson to Jenny's phone. Calls that rang through without answer. No voicemail connection, just silence. Then investigators make a discovery in Sandbeck Plantation. Jenny's personal items, cosmetics, a teddy bear, her things abandoned in the woods. Police now have a suspect. They have a location, but they still don't have Jenny. This is where the case takes a fascinating turn into cutting-edge investigative science. Enter Malcolm Coulthard, a forensic linguist. His job? To analyze those 4 text messages supposedly sent by Jenny from Scotland and determine if she actually wrote them. Now, you might be thinking, how can you tell who wrote a text message? Here's the thing: every single one of us has what linguists call an idiolect. It's your linguistic fingerprint, the way you spell, punctuate, phrase things, structure your sentences. You have consistent patterns you probably don't even realize you use. We all do. Coulthard's methodology was meticulous. He examined Jenny's authentic pre-disappearance texts and compared them to the suspicious messages sent after she vanished. He looked at spelling habits, punctuation patterns, phrasing preferences, syntactic structures, and word choices. And what he found was damning. The fake messages bore the hallmarks of David Hodgson's communication patterns, not Jenny's. Someone was impersonating her. Someone who knew she'd disappeared. Someone who wanted to create the illusion she was alive and well in Scotland. That someone was trying to control the narrative even after her death. Here's the legal challenge. In the UK, as in most common law jurisdictions, you don't technically need a body to prosecute murder. But you need what's called overwhelming probative force. Evidence so compelling that guilt becomes the only rational conclusion. The prosecution built their case like a mosaic, piece by piece. The digital evidence. Phone records showing the communication between Jenny and Hodgson, followed by those eerie silent calls. The forensic linguistics. Proof that the text messages were forgeries, evidence of deception and consciousness of guilt. The physical evidence. Jenny's personal items discovered in Sandbeck Plantation, along with DNA evidence from their secret woodland meeting spots. The behavioral evidence. Hodgson's changing statements to police. First, he denied any relationship with Jenny. Then he admitted it but claimed it only began after her 16th birthday. The lies kept shifting. The circumstantial web, higher car mileage records, phone location data, witness testimony about Hodgson's movements. No single piece proved murder, but together, they created what the trial judge would later call evidence that was entirely overwhelming. But why? What drives someone to murder a teenage girl they've known since childhood? According to prosecutors, it came down to pathological jealousy, and this is distinct from ordinary romantic jealousy. We're talking about obsessional jealousy characterized by uncontrolled surveillance, entitlement-based beliefs like, she belongs to me, fear of abandonment and escalation pathways toward violence. The trigger? Jenny had expressed interest in Hodgson's own brother. Think about the psychological mechanism at play here. Hodgson had groomed Jenny, controlled her, kept her secret, maintained dominance over her life. And now she was showing interest in someone else, someone in his own family. His illusion of control was shattered. Criminologist Karen Monckton-Smith's homicide timeline model fits perfectly. A history of coercive behavior, rapid relationship intensity facilitated by age and power differences, control and isolation, a trigger event, obsessive escalation, and finally, the final act of control. Murder. And even after her death, Hodgson continued trying to control the narrative through those fabricated text messages. He was, in a sense, still grooming, still projecting his constructed version of Jenny's choices, maintaining psychological possession even beyond the grave. When the case went to trial in 2008, 3 years after Jenny's disappearance, the jury deliberated for 10 hours. The defense tried shifting blame onto Jenny's father, alleging abuse and suggesting she had motivation to flee. But the judge later noted these allegations were made without the slightest shred of supporting evidence. The verdict? Unanimous. Guilty of murder. David Hodgson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term before parole eligibility. But here's what makes this case even more haunting. Hodgson showed complete emotional flatness at conviction. No remorse. Continued denial of guilt despite overwhelming evidence. And to this day, he has refused to disclose where Jenny's remains are located. Let's talk about what this means for Jenny's family, because this is where the cruelty extends beyond the murder itself. Family therapist Pauline Boss identified a phenomenon called ambiguous loss, a state of frozen grief where the absence of tangible confirmation of death prevents normal grieving processes. Without a body, families exist in perpetual limbo. They can't simultaneously hope for their loved one's return and move through traditional stages of grief. Boss calls it potentially the most distressful of all losses because it affords no opportunity for closure. For the Nicholl family, this means no funeral rites, no viewing, no ceremonial recognition, just an eternal question mark where their daughter should be. And there are practical obstacles too. Difficulty accessing bank accounts, selling property, obtaining legal documents. The emotional toll compounds the bureaucratic nightmare. Remarkably, the Nicholl family has chosen not to ask Hodgson where Jenny is. This isn't defeat, it's an assertion of agency. By refusing to grant him the satisfaction of being asked, they prevent his non-disclosure from becoming yet another instrument of power over them. It's a reclamation of control in a context where control was fundamentally violated. Jenny's case, along with other no-body murders like that of Helen McCourt in 1988, led to significant legislative reform. In 2020, the UK passed the Prisoners, Disclosure of Information About Victims Act, popularly known as Helen's Law, named after Helen McCourt, whose killer also never revealed her location. The law is straightforward but powerful. The parole board must now consider a prisoner's refusal to disclose information about victims' remains when making release decisions. It's a statutory duty to factor in this cruelty. Helen's law represents a fundamental shift, balancing prisoners' rights against the rights of victims' families to information, dignity, and the possibility of burial rights. The message is clear. Inflicting secondary victimization through denial of closure should factor into assessments of dangerousness and rehabilitation. The Jenny Nicholl case opened the door to a new era of digital forensics. Coulthard's linguistic analysis has since been refined and expanded. Today, we're seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning applied to authorship attribution. Neural networks using models like BERT can identify patterns of linguistic variation with even greater precision than human experts. They can be trained on short, ungrammatical, cross-genre texts, exactly the kind of messy, real-world evidence recovered in crime scenes. But there are risks. AI can perpetuate biases from training data. Algorithmic approaches lack the explainability of human-interpretable analysis. And there are challenges in handling the incredible diversity of human language variation across demographics, cultures, and contexts. The future will require integrating AI-assisted analysis with human expert judgment while maintaining transparency about limitations and error rates. The Jenny Nicholl murder represents both triumph and tragedy. The triumph? A murderer was convicted without a body, without a crime scene, without a weapon, using digital evidence, linguistic analysis, and the careful construction of circumstantial proof. It demonstrates that modern justice systems can adapt to new forms of evidence and secure convictions even when traditional evidence is unavailable. The tragedy? Jenny's family still doesn't have closure. No forensic technique, no matter how sophisticated, can substitute for the psychological finality that burial rites provide. No conviction, no matter how certain, can restore what violence has destroyed. This case sits suspended between prosecutorial success and family incompleteness. It stands as testimony to both the remarkable capacity of modern investigative methods and their fundamental inability to bring back what was lost. Jenny Nicholl was 19 years old when she died. She had routines, plans, a future. She was systematically groomed, isolated, controlled, and ultimately murdered by someone who believed he owned her. And even in death, he tried to control her story through 4 fake text messages. But forensic linguistics, the science of your unique linguistic fingerprint, helped expose the truth. It helped secure justice even without Jenny's body. The case changed how we prosecute murders in the digital age. It changed our laws regarding victims' rights. It demonstrated that your texting style, your word choices, your punctuation habits, they're all uniquely yours. They're evidence. They're proof. David Hodgson sits in prison today, still refusing to say where Jenny is, still exercising that final act of control. But he couldn't control the truth, and that's what ultimately convicted him. Jenny Nicholl's case will echo through courtrooms for decades to come. A reminder that justice evolves, that evidence transforms, and that even in the digital age, murder cannot hide forever. If you found this case analysis compelling, consider subscribing for more deep dives into forensic science, criminal psychology, and landmark legal cases that changed how we pursue justice. And remember, in the digital age, everything leaves a trace. Even the words we choose. Thank you.